Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Beer and Broadband. We have the beer, and we've got a lot of people from a lot of countries able to talk about broadband today. So this is the global episode. We have people from multiple countries here with us with a lot of experience in the broadband space. Super excited to dive into it. These guys have an amazing amount of experience and knowledge that is great to share. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off and pass it to these fine gentlemen to introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right into some of the questions. So we'll start off with Steve.
Great, Nick. Good evening from Johannesburg, South Africa. Good evening to my fellow guests on this podcast. So I am the Chief Executive Officer of Isiwze.com. Isiwze is a recent startup working on fiber to the home in low-income informal communities. We are pioneering a new model in South Africa on a prepaid per-day basis, and kicked our proof of concept project off in a small town outside Cape Town called Stellenbosch in the Winelands, in a community called Kaimandi. And I'd love to share that story tonight with your listeners.
Awesome. Brad?
Hi, folks. Yeah, Brad Fisher here. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for a company called Distributel, operating nationally here in Canada. Distributel is part of the Bell Canada family of companies as of late, and we are focused on serving the consumer broadband, voice, and TV markets across our large country here, as well as the small medium business market with both broadband services and cloud-based business phone solutions. And so, some of the interesting things that we're doing here, of course, relate to fiber build out and transformation, migration of a large base of customers to that product set and all that comes with it. As well, in Canada, big focus here on community broadband and getting broadband built in underserved and unserved regions of the country, an area my company has been partnering with fiber builders and investment firms for a number of years now. So some great progress on that front, getting everybody on the global stage with high-speed connectivity.
Awesome. Well, welcome. And last but certainly not least, take it away.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, my name is Isak Finér. I'm calling in today from Gothenburg in the southwestern corner of Sweden. I'm the CRO as well as Brad is, but not at the same company. That would be very odd. I'm with a software company called COS Systems. So at COS, we have been building fiber operation systems, BSS, OSS, for purpose built for fiber since 2007-8. And we support many different business models, but the sort of where we are unique is in the wholesale open access space. We might talk about it depending on where the discussions go, but in Sweden, open access is a very common business model, especially in community broadband, as Brad mentioned, is starting to happen in Canada as well. And we're used there to operate. Our platform is used to operate networks there, but we have been expanding globally, and I would say mainly in the US and Canada since 2013. So about when I started, I started traveling over to the States and have been doing since, even though we've built a bunch of people in the States now too. But I just got back from Miami, so I still travel quite a bit back and forth.
Well, guys, I really appreciate it. And before we go too much farther, guys, so what's the beer today? I have a 90 shilling, little Colorado ale, I think, so much. What do you guys from different countries? Steve, what do you got there?
I'm drinking Heineken.
You got
staple
of nice. All right. Brad, what do you got?
Well, I went Netherlands as well with the Grolsch today here. I
Nice.
didn't have much choice here this morning in Canada.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. And Isaac, what do you
I've
got?
got from Brutal Brewing. I have the Mad Canary. It's if I can tell a short story, in Sweden we have a monopoly on alcohol, so you can't buy alcohol in grocery stores. You have to buy it either at the bar or you go to the government-run liquor store that are all over the country. Actually, great system because the assortment is fantastic. But you can buy beers that are under a certain percentage of alcohol in the grocery stores. So this is one of those. It's 3.5%. So you can buy it at a grocery store, and they're called uh, people's beer or beer of the people, the kind low in alcohol you can buy in grocery stores. And I actually had to Google. It's kind of a weird name, beer of the people or people's beer.
Beer of the
Yeah, but
people.
it was actually a finance minister of Sweden when there was a big debate on what types of alcohol content beers in grocery stores could have, and he came up with this term, and it stuck. So that's what we drink in Sweden: people's beer.
I feel like beer is like broadband, right? Everybody should have broadband and everybody should have beer. It's the people's
Yeah,
broadband, right?
yeah.
Well, guys, let's jump into, given we have 4 different countries represented here, obviously with broadband and technology, the economic, social, regulatory environment is different in every country. But I guess it'd be interesting to get each of your takes on, what from those kind of the nuances of different countries, what are the things that you guys have to consider, or what are you seeing going on that is different within your respective countries, knowing that I think collectively we all have the same goal of, I think, Brad, Isaac, Steve, you all said it, like, of connecting people, right? Bringing more people together. So who's maybe give your perspective on kind of what are the nuances on a country basis that you have to deal with?
Yeah. So
Maybe Steve, you start, or Isaac
yeah,
start, either one.
I could start. I mean, we do business in many different countries, which is very interesting because you can compare, right? And how things are progressive in different markets. And in Sweden now, for example, it's an extremely mature fiber market. The race has already been. I think the fiber coverage is about 98% of everyone in Sweden can get fiber, and I think
That's
it's
all. That's
yeah,
all you
yeah,
got.
yeah.
98%.
They haven't reached all the way yet. So the discussion here is more on how do we connect the last ones, right? And it's it was how it developed was really where there was one incumbent in the entire country, and then the communities were forced to buy for them for schools and municipal uh, buildings really, and it just didn't work out. It became too expensive, so they started building their own networks, and that wasn't really good because then it was this telecom sector was privatized, and there was a big debate about community-owned versus private and so on. And also these community operators, they quickly realized that okay, building infrastructure, that is something we know how to do often because we have a utility, but offering broadband services, that's something completely different, and that is why this separation happened. That is common in Sweden, where you have an open access network or a wholesale model where you invite other providers, and that sort of came to be more due to you know partly regulations and then partly inability to actually be efficient. If you're a small community with 500 homes, setting up an entire ISP business, it just doesn't make sense. And then consolidation happened, and we got these large nationwide operators who actually come in and operate the network with an open access model. And after some time, private investors came into the market and started to build network, and they were not interested in being an ISP either. They wanted to invest in infrastructure, and then
They wanted to make
exactly,
money.
and then the wholesale the wholesale piece of it, open access, caught with them now too. And what I can see happening in the US is Canada now is that we're starting to see this wholesale model approach with investor driven, really starting to take off. So that is very interesting. At the same time as we see the community market, both in the US and Canada, taking off. So maybe not the regulatory little bit, because regulations of communities becoming an ISP and competing, and that differs between different states and so on. But it's I would say at least we're at a very interesting time in the broadband space overall. Maybe not as exciting nowadays in Sweden, but in the rest of the world, I would say the big countries that matter.
Maybe you guys are a good model to follow if you're at 98%. I don't know. I'm not sure what Canada and South Africa are, but I don't think it's at 98% fiber connectivity.
So,
What do you? How about you, Brad?
Well, the Canadian telecom marketplace has largely operated as an incumbent monopoly with smaller competitive players doing innovative things, on the fringe. And part of that is a result of the telecommunications policy and our regulator, the CRTC, which would be the equivalent of the FCC, Nick, for you. And there are regulated tariffs for independents to lease empty broadband pipe and bring their own internet, bring their own value-added services like TV and voice on top of that, and package those things up for businesses across the country. And I think that competitive element has been instrumental in breaking through metered use and getting unlimited plans to become table stakes and really open up the world of applications and the world of content for Canadian consumers, which without competitors being innovative in the packaging and pricing, we might not have seen that. We might still be paying for broadband here in Canada the way you pay for a taxi ride with a meter running the whole time. And, that's not going to work with Netflix. Certainly not in my house and at the family here. So there's some really good things that have come from that competitive segment in the telecommunications service provider market. But I would say, 90% of the business is still tied up with 100-year-old oligopoly incumbent players that had the rights of way and had the 100-year head start on infrastructure. So what we also have, though, is a recent phenomenon supported both by public and private partnerships to get true fiber built in these regions that have been often overlooked for probably ROI, return on investment region is not reaching a threshold. We're not going to build there. Density is not big enough. And so the big players have left big parts of the country, unserved or underserved. And there has just been a rush, almost like a gold rush in these partnerships forming, municipalities getting in on it, sometimes as equity partners, sometimes just embracing investment in their region and getting people connected. So we're seeing that, of course, in some of our First Nations reserves and communities in parts of Northern Canada. We've got tens of thousands of homes covered with fiber to the prem, gigabit plus broadband in places that we're relying on satellite internet or Wi-Fi solutions from the city hall. So these things are changing fast, and programs, both government sponsored programs with matching funding, as well as some of the infrastructure funds, the private equity guys coming in and partnering. My company has played the service provider role. We haven't been as as focused on actually owning the fiber and building it. We've been leaving a lot of that to the private equity infrastructure funds and the fiber builders, but we've been the service layer, and it's been a very successful model where we've got the call centers, we've got the ability to print bills, take orders, market and sell under our brands, and that's really been a success story in many communities. And then, of course, in the more densely populated parts of the nation, our bigger cities, Toronto and Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, you may have heard of some of these places, faraway places. We are that competitive voice out there. We help rationalize pricing. We keep the incumbents on their toes, and we drive that force for innovation, both in the product itself as well as the pricing, packaging, and the marketing itself, in terms of getting the product out to customers, through digital channels, through online channels, even retail channels, where we've had the benefit of partnering with a large retailer here nationally, a company called Costco. And so
I've heard of that little company.
I don't know if you've ever, yeah. And so that's over 100 stores across the country. We're in most of them as the flagship broadband internet and home phone service provider partner to Costco.
I'm curious, is it, you mentioned about and maybe Steve, this is where, how, I guess maybe you got started. I mean, the point Brad made around, public, private equity and investments into these areas that the incumbents didn't get into, right? Is that, I guess, maybe what drove you to try to go into some of these smaller areas in South Africa?
Yeah. So it's a great question, and we are private equity backed. But before I even go there, maybe just to give you the context of our market. So the telecoms industry in South Africa had a state-owned monopoly, which controlled it for the last 120 years. New regulation set in the late 90s, and that saw the mobile network operators kick off. We had 3 licenses granted in the first 3 or 4 years of post-deregulation. South Africa is a complex country. We've got a population of over 60 million people, 17 million homes roughly, but we also have one of the most unequal distributions of wealth and income in the world. I think we on par with Brazil, if not even ahead, nothing to be proud of. And that means that of our 60 million population, only 5 million people are really credit worthy and credit active, i.e. are able to access your traditional telco model of a monthly bill that you pay through your bank accounts with a debit order. And that's got some bearing because in the mobile world about 20 years ago, the operators realized they would never grow their market beyond that 5 million subscribers. In their state came up with a different way of paying, and they came up with the whole prepaid model, which has really blossomed across many poorer parts of the world, so across Africa, LATAM, Southeast Asia, and so on. And that's good and well, and that means the mobile networks are probably able to claim a 98% coverage today. However, their costing is high, and certainly if you're a poorer consumer, you can't substitute your broadband experience, or you can't access mobile as a truly ubiquitous broadband experience. So fiber to the home kicks in. Our fiber industry is relatively young, about 8 years old, and the fiber operators, and it's really competitive, the 5 or 6 really big fiber network operators, probably about 200 ISPs, they've rolled out to the top 4 million homes, top 4 million homes in the country, which happen to be in the wealthy suburbs, to people who are creditworthy and are able to pay on a monthly basis. The rest of the country, the 13 million homes that are not connected, really are at the mercy of very expensive mobile data. So our model is to take the learnings of the mobile network 20 years ago and offer a prepaid model on fiber to the home, which is, it might seem fairly obvious, but it's certainly got a lot of, shall we say, historical constraints, from how shareholders see the model to how banks view it as well. So what we've done is, in the last 4 or 5 months, at our own expense, built a fiber network and an ISP that is able to sell to people as and when they have money in their pocket. And our price points start at $5 Rand, which in US dollar terms is about 25 US cents a day for uncapped internet for at least 100 megs a second speed, which I'm told is quite impressive. And on the basis of that, as and when people have money, they buy access to the network, and we've seen great results so far. Results that show this is a bankable project and one that might roll out nationally and possibly even beyond the borders of South Africa. So really what we're trying to address is, I guess, a failure at a fiber level to move beyond the wealthy suburbs and offer a model that's more ubiquitous in poorer but far denser suburbs than has been done to date in this country.
Is it a mix of fiber and wireless, or is it pure, fiber to the home?
It's pure fiber to the home. We put a router in every home, and that's how people access it. And again, when your consumer can only spend 25 US cents a day and not even buy, there's no assurance I'll buy every day of the month, it does cause some concern. But the way we built the model, it's a per day per device model, and some homes are 4 or 5 devices, so therefore your revenue goes up per day, and so does the density that these communities operate in, really high dense communities.
I'm curious. I mean, I guess, to the point of, there has been a shift, right, in investment, right? There is the big, obviously the large companies, as Brad mentioned, and then Isak, obviously there's the penetration is so high already in Sweden. But do you guys see, I guess, across all the countries that there is the shift moving more towards private? I guess, is there a shift between the public and private investment? I mean, seemingly everybody, that the examples you guys just said were more private investment versus public investment. I guess, do you see that collectively continuing in your respective countries?
I'll kick that off, Nick. So certainly in South Africa, the bulk of the fiber investment over the last 8 years has been private. The state-owned incumbent still plays in the fiber space, and they've, I guess, got the advantage of having had networks in the ground for over 100 years. But certainly the new areas are getting built out, and the areas that were not served historically are all privately funded.
Isak, what about you?
Yeah, I think, as I said, I mean, now at the point where in Sweden, it's really the last homes to be connected, right? They're not in the cities for sure. They are very remote. I mean, most of the summer home areas have already been built with fiber. And it's been a mix of public investment and private investment, but now it's really to the point where it's very difficult. There is no business case to connect these last homes. So there is it's still the ambition to reach everyone, right? And it is a mix here, and there are subsidies, and when there are subsidies, some will be picked up by communities and some will be picked up with by private providers. And one debate that has been going on is whether a community, or let's say you're a county. We have similar to in the US, we have counties in Sweden. But if you operate a municipal network, you couldn't go outside. So it could be you actually have fiber on the border, and you have 5 homes there that you could connect. It would make sense, but they're in that other county, but they have no fiber close at all. So that's been a debate where, if we're going to reach these goals, why should we let lines on the map prevent people from connecting these? No one else wants to connect them. So
Because it's politics.
Yeah, so that's been, there are always these interesting things, as you say, politics. But really,
I'm just curious. I mean, I don't know, Brad, does open access at all exist in Canada or South Africa? Like the open access model, is that a thing in any of those countries?
In Canada, certainly, where public money is going into the partnership, into the build, open access is most often a requirement. Now, that said, given the size of some of these communities, some of the markets, you typically end up launching with a lead telecom, ISP that has a de facto exclusivity for some period of time because they're set up to do this. They were part of the part of the bid, frankly, for some of the funding in the first place, and had that head start. But should others come along and bring a viable business model and wish to compete in those open access builds, they're welcome to do that as well. And in the end, competition is a good thing because it brings affordability, it brings innovation and choice for the consumers.
Yeah, and similarly in our markets, we are largely open access. In some cases, there is a de facto monopoly between the F&O and the ISP because there is just one or two choices. Sounds a bit like the Canadian market, but certainly in the more competitive urban markets, the networks are all open access, and there's a huge base of ISPs to choose from as a consumer.
I guess, and as a I'm a marketing guy, so I am always fascinated by how people attract customers. I mean, is there anything we can learn from the different approaches of trying to acquire more customers, right? I mean, part of this goal is we're trying to bring broadband to these people, but at the same time, how do you try to, I mean, obviously, Steve, you're going into a certain market. Sweden obviously is very penetrated. Canada is a giant country. Like, what are the ways, I guess, that you're seeing to try to drive that adoption, to try to get people to sign up for broadband?
So if I can go first, I would say it's been in Sweden at least, it's been very community driven, and now I'm not talking about like the municipality, but
like the mayor says, "Come sign up."
no, but well, in some sense, yes, but it's been more driven on a local level by people talking to each other, coming together. Smaller villages have formed sort of small groups or almost like a non-profit. I don't know if the actual term for it, but they come together and form ish a non-profit, and often they build they dig themselves and put the conduit in, and then they work with a provider or an open access operator to actually provide connectivity, and that approach was sort of starting to be formalized, and I'm not gonna promote our stuff, but we built a tool around this concept of splitting the market up into smaller neighborhoods or fiberhoods, and that was the it was basically the way it happened, and then tools started to become available to use that sort of tactics where you involve the subscribers out there, because you can really get help from people who are really eager to get this into their community. Either they're just selfish, they want to stream Netflix, or they might have a company that really needs it, or they're just annoyed because it's slow and expensive what they have, or they just want to
Game of Thrones drove broadband adoption,
yeah.
right?
No, but so I would say that is from our experience, and what we've seen is, like, if you can get the community to back you and sort of sell it for you, that's great.
Hmm.
And in Sweden, it's been, I would say, a collaboration. So you drive and build community demand, and then you have your ISPs. If it's open access, for example, you will have them also go into to market and market to people when the time is ready for it, when the build is getting closer. So now we were, you asked if open access exists in South Africa and Canada, and we've been is involved in both markets, and we were sort of a part of that initial open access boom in South Africa. So that was really interesting to see that happening, and I haven't heard about your model, Steve, but it sounds really cool. And if I can pass one question over to you, I wonder, like, if you pay for that little for only one day, do you actually only pay for one day ahead of time, or can you buy for, I prepay a month, or I prepay 10 days for 5 devices, or it's or is it like, do you have a system for micro payments?
Yeah. Yeah, if I might answer that, Isaac. So we've had to build our own OSS BSS stack. Effectively, from a consumer perspective, it's a wallet. From an operator perspective, it's an OSS BSS system that's designed for prepaid. So our model is such that you can buy R5 a day, or 30 Rand a week, or 100 Rand a month, and you can buy whenever there's value in your wallet. So you top up your wallet through various mechanisms, including a reseller market in the community we operate in, which is part of the kind of economic empowerment model we have, where people spin up small businesses that can make some small commission based on selling the R5 or whatever the denomination is. But given that you've asked the question and I'm talking, I'll carry on, because our model is truly hyper-local. So our model relies on deep community engagement. The communities we're in are historically underserved. They often referred to in South African terms as townships. They may often be geographically removed from the city, and that goes back to South Africa's unfortunate history of apartheid and the legacy spatial system that resulted from that. And we found that the biggest challenge in our community is that people simply don't believe that this deal exists. They almost think there's a catch. No one has ever offered true broadband at
Really?
this price point. So when
they think you're trying to scam them,
basically, and how we've overcome that is we offer the first day for free. So based on your mobile number, that's how you register on our e-wallet, and that gives you a free day where we're not charging you, but you can get a sense of the networking, test it, and after that, people generally realize this is the real deal. What we did for February being the month of love, is that we gave everyone who ever wanted it a free access for the entire month, and we saw our usage go up by four times. So unfortunately, we're in March as of today, and people are now paying again. But the community had a full month of testing the network as much as they wished, and hopefully that's helped people realize this is for real, and have come to benefit from 30 days of access onto the internet, and now we hope we so integrated into their lives that they'll never go back.
I thought
awesome.
You would say you gave them the 29th of February for free, but
every year.
Leap years.
Only 3 out of 4 years it's free. The 29th, but the 30th is free every year. That's awesome. I mean, I just love, Steve, that the sophistication in just the systems to be able to do that, e-wallet, to have a free day. That's certainly the envy of my operation, where we're doing acquisition in a much more traditional way, and sort of in our urban markets, it's traditional marketing. We'll do some radio spots. Like, we're actually hoping to get a few TV spots later this year on some of the national sports channels. So people are still viewing a lot of live TV, and also digital. Spending an enormous amount of money. I hand money over every month to Google, like incredible amounts of money to get in the search, capture customers there. We're doing some things, of course, in the retail space, because we have a great partner there with Costco, and then when you get out of the major markets where you're traditional marketing, mass marketing, you get into these communities, it's a completely different program. It's grassroots marketing. We've got people out at town fairs in the community and town hall meetings, and we're doing door to door, and we're doing some referral programs. Refer a friend, get a free month. These kinds of things that we can track in the back office. But it is really sort of you almost have two marketing departments in acquiring customers in those communities, and then in the urban cities where customers have so much choice, and there's really no pent-up demand. It's a saturated market. It's about higher and higher speed. So we're certainly still at that level of maturity in the broadband market and the fiber market, where speed sells. So the higher the number, the more interest there is in the product. Nick might remember my bananas analogy. For the same amount of money, I'll take all the bananas that you got, even if I can't eat them. And sort of the same with gigabits of broadband. So we've got competitors selling 8 gig symmetrical internet. Nobody's using 8 gig, unless you're running a data center, in a house. So So but it is part of the marketing game. But I think we're going to see that peak, and talking to people in other markets, certainly in Europe, in the UK, families, buyers, consumers looking at broadband more like the utility when they're buying water, and they're buying electricity. Like, how many gallons per minute or liters per minute of water are you paying for, Nick, at your house? You don't know.
No
It's like,
idea.
I get enough. It's enough to have a shower. So, is broadband going to go that way? This is a question. And are we going to lose the ability to differentiate with, a bigger number? It's bigger. It's fiber. It's the speed of light. It's 8. It's better than
Yeah,
3.
that's why Steve's model is fascinating, because it's like, wow, the idea of, it's just a very different model, right? Than obviously North America and Europe. It's, the fact that you're able to have a system in place to do that, I guess, to that point, where do you guys look for innovation? Like, where do you seek out? Broadband is global at the end of the day, right? We're connecting each other. Where do you guys look for ideas and innovation to continue to evolve what you're doing?
So what we do, we are the operations platform, or the BSS OSS um, for providers, for operators, and as I said, the niche is open access. So what that means is we can basically provision services from any number of providers at the same location at the same time. So there is no restriction. You could buy 10 different provision services in your home. And what we think is going to happen is that you will start, when this becomes more available, I think what you're going to see is more provision services of other types. Let's say today telehealth is a big trend, right? So you can set up a video call with your doctor. It's over the top. There is no specific security except some encryptions. There is no guaranteed bandwidth for that call or anything. So let's say you want to really revolutionize healthcare. That would be if you could treat more patients in their home, where they feel at home and they feel good and they're gonna recover faster, and it's gonna spend, if you will have to spend a lot of less resources, on each patient, if they could stay at home and get good care, and you can monitor them and so on. But then you would need a very reliable connection, and that is where I see one innovation that will probably come. And there are, people are testing this out. But imagine if you could have a
We know there's a PE company somewhere looking to spend some
yeah,
money.
but
Bigger that.
but I mean, in Brad's house, for example, if someone needs telehealth monitoring, and his entire family is streaming Netflix, he doesn't want that telehealth stream to get bogged down because of Game of Thrones.
They just told him his diagnosis and it clipped out,
Yeah.
right?
No, but then you can actually provision it with a higher priority in the network. There are so many things. Or if you have a company, they are using cloud storage. Well, why not provision an actual stream dedicated for that between the data center and that company? And or another very critical application, home security. What if you could have a dedicated stream for the home security cameras? Uh, maybe not in every home, but in some. Uh, um, yeah. So I think.
I guess that's to that point, though, and I'm just thinking of the rural areas in Canada and then the areas that Steve's talking about. There are people that don't have the financial means, right? There's a different economic situation for somebody who lives in major metropolitan city versus somebody who lives even in tribal nations or in a smaller community. So those types of amazing applications, how do you bring those? Like, is it because you still have people at the end of the day, people are trying to make a profit, right? Despite the fact that, we're trying to bring connectivity. So I guess, is your point, Isaac, that the open access model is a way to try to bring those applications to people without the incremental cost?
Well, I mean, you can deliver any service to anyone over the top if they have internet, and some people say it's going to be one pipe and then everything else is over the top. While some people say, and I believe so, you will actually have more and more services provisioned in these networks when you have them in place and so on. I don't think it will really affect security and quality and priority and those kind of things, but accessibility, maybe that's not the big driver. But what I think we will see is that when you have more of these wholesale or more open networks, I think we will start seeing aggregation points. So you don't, as a provider of any type of service, you don't have to go out into this little rural place. You can connect in Toronto, for example, and then you can reach all these networks, and provide your services, and that will open up the type of services I'm looking for. But really, it all builds on the open networks catching on, because a private provider uh, might not have the tools to be able to provision services on behalf of others and charge wholesale fees and make that in an efficient manner. So it's yeah, it's exciting to see where all this plays out.
You touched on something, Isaac, that we're struggling to get a bead on, and that is, as these services evolve, bandwidth management, like you talked about, ensuring that there's priority or committed bandwidth for certain applications at the cost of others. Traffic shaping, effectively, either in the network itself or at the client side, in the home, to make sure that the right applications, real-time communication versus downloads, and adaptive bit rate can drop down so long as the health applications are working, or the school from home applications are working, and we're largely providing connectivity for these types of applications in a purely over-the-top model. We're not sure that in the full fiber world, just how much bandwidth, like there's just so much bandwidth, it's not congested yet. And so, the need for some of the traffic shaping and traffic prioritization capabilities, either, in the network, used by the operator, or at the home as configured, at the router level with the client. We're not sure just how important that's going to be, and whether we should be investing in that more or not, because sort of infinite bandwidth feels like the stuff just works, versus prior days where you had busy hour and you had to start to categorize your traffic and cap some so other things would work. What do you think, guys? Is that something that is a differentiator for operators and maybe for customers if they're able to control it themselves?
I mean, Brad, if I might respond to that, our market, I think, is still working out what the internet can do, particularly the target market we're going after with our prepaid per day model. What we have realized, though, is that people do want these services. They do want e-health, ed-tech, streaming services for entertainment and so on. But they're not, just like they can't prepay their bandwidth each month up front, they can't pay for those services up front either. So what we're realizing is we've now got a wallet on one hand and a network, effectively digital distribution, on the other. And a number of these services, including some well-known streaming services, have come to us to say, look, can we distribute our products over you? Of course you can at an over-the-top level, but they can't sort out the payment side of that. So that's where our wallet comes in. And we're now trying to work with some of these operators on a per-day model. So if you buy your internet per day, can you add a day of streaming? Or can you add a e-health appointment? Or can you add a school lesson? And Nick, I guess that speaks to some of the innovation. And Brad, I'm not sure it really answers your question, but our market's not really even asking questions yet around, well, if I buy a day of e-health, does it get prioritized over Netflix, for example? It's not something that's there. I'm sure in time it will evolve, but it certainly does. For me, it's fascinating to see how these things evolve when you start to think a bit differently about how you take stuff to market.
Yeah. So very different market situation, but I think in in markets where you actually can buy all the newest stuff, I think history has a way of proving that the capacity that is there will be used. I mean, we had, when I grew up, we had a black and white TV. Even I know I'm older than I than I look, uh, and I mean,
I had one too.
You remember the 28.8, the dial up, the
oh,
sound of it makes.
definitely, yeah. But I mean, back then, what was out there you could do, and then higher speeds came, and applications came
Remember
that.
when we thought a T1 was
Yeah,
fast?
yeah. No, but that again, 4K TV. Wow, this is like, reality. Nothing is ever gonna be better. Now you have 8K TV, and what will happen in the future? It's virtual reality when you see an entire world around you, and the
Yeah.
bandwidth needed to do that. That is even more than we can imagine today. So I don't know. I
Which
don't
is
know,
funny when
Brad,
Brad
but
says 8K's marketing, but it's like, 8K could be filled up, or 8 gig, sorry, 8
8
gig.
gig, 8
Yeah.
gig. Well, yeah, VR.
Yeah.
That's a lot of concurrent images, for
so
sure.
no,
Yeah,
I think it's very hard. I'm not. I don't have an answer for you, Brad, on your question there. But it it tends to be used. Whatever capacity is there tends to be used by something. Someone will
right.
come up with
This is
something.
Yeah.
same with it
Agreed.
was the same with memory, right? Like, wasn't it Bill Gates? He said 640K. That's all you need. That's it. That's all you'll ever need for memory in a personal computer. So
Yeah,
I guess if you build it, they will come. Right? This is they will
that is
fill it.
the story. Well, guys, we've almost shockingly been chatting for almost an hour. I want to be respectful of time. So I'd like to, we could clearly, I think we probably should have another global beer and broadband. Maybe the flip it, then Brad and I are we're at night and you guys are in the morning. Um, but I'd like to maybe just kind of as a kind of parting thoughts on given the it's obviously the conversation. There's a lot of similarities across the different countries. Every country is in a different spot. The U.S. obviously, from our perspective, obviously spending a significant amount of government funds
Yeah.
to try to drive that connectivity um, with a mix of fiber, wireless, lots of different deployment methods, still having the same struggle I think that every country has relative to regulations and right of ways and all the kind of deployment issues. But I guess maybe the parting thought is for each of you guys, what's the one thing you would share or one learning from your experience in your respective countries that you'd want other people to know? Like, what can they learn from? And should there be more, I guess, global discussions on this so that we're not reinventing the wheel all the time? And anybody can
Okay,
start.
I will go first, and this has very little to do with technology, but something that has surprised me when working for a long time in the U.S. market, and that is, um, everyone is hyped. Everyone in the industry is super hyped about fiber, and you should be, right? We should be. It's compared to other technologies, it is the
Cool.
best. It's the capacity is endless. You just tune up the electronics a bit, and you can pump even more. And therefore, since it's so great, people have their mind on a certain price level. And also, how expensive it is to put in because you got to dig and all the permitting, and it takes a lot of time and all of that kind of stuff. So, and I don't know how this came to be, but in Sweden, there was like a level where this is what internet should cost, very cheap. So that was like the mark that everyone tried to hit. So they were selling fiber at the same price as DSL or other technologies, and that drove adoption paired with the competition on an open network where you have providers competing. But it seems like you're so focused on the greatness of this product and the cost that goes into it, so you don't really look at it long scale. You need the take rates to split the cost between as many customers as possible. And if you have the customer, then they will grow. They will buy a 4K TV. They will have more devices. You can run promotions, let them try a gig for a month, and they will see, well, it actually is a bit better, and they stay on that plan, and they will add some other services from you. So that is a big surprise to me, actually, that there's a very little differentiation between like the entry product that might be on the internet of 100 meg symmetrical, or 250 megs or something, and the gig, or even 2 gig or 5 gig. In Sweden, when this market grew so much, you could get that entry product really cheap. There was it didn't make sense to stay on any other technology. Why would you, if you're paying the same price and get 10 times the speed? And that is something I think that anyone could actually learn from. That people want to stay on that plan. They will upgrade, or you force them to upgrade when they're on the network. Okay, 10 by 10. It used to be 10 by 10 in Sweden. It's too slow, and we have better technology, so we're dropping that plan. Now you're on 100 by 100, and your price increased a little bit, but you got 10 times the speed. So as long as you get the customers on the network and you get higher take rates, that will flip your business case if you sort of play the longer game a little bit. So that would be it. That's something that surprises me, coming from Sweden over to the US. The very little differentiation in price, and I think we could see a completely different adoption if we were sort of smarter on pricing.
Great points.
I'd build on what you're what you're saying, Isaac, in that the pricing. There just seems to be, over the years, whatever the speed was, there's a certain range, there's a certain share of the consumer wallet that they're willing to pay for a contemporary broadband product. And it's sort of, in Canada, maybe that ranges from $40 to $100, somewhere in there. It doesn't go to 200 Canadian dollars. And people will take it if it's less, but they won't go without it, in that $40 to $100 range. And it just seems to be, as the speeds go up, you move up in the range, and then there's downward pressure as new speeds come in at the top, over the years, whether it was 1 meg to 7 to 25 to 100. Now we're in the gigs, and we're going to start losing count, right, of how many gigs it is over time. I think one of the biggest, learnings that I would sort of bring is just how incredibly indispensable, seems obvious, but how incredibly indispensable a broadband connection has become in today's world. And it was accelerated through the pandemic, coming out the other side, just how important it is. People, as inflationary pressures creep into our marketplace, into our economy, people are cutting back on food before they will cut back on broadband. Like, that's, I don't get a lot of downgrade orders. I only get upgrade orders. Yeah. And, we know people are struggling to make ends meet in certain parts of the economy. And I think that underscores just the importance of the mandate we all seem to share in getting broadband to places that don't necessarily have it yet. I'd like to be at 99% fiber penetration. I'm, somewhere 50 to 70, depending on what province you're talking about. But we're going to get there, and we know where the prices will be. We know how essential everything has become, and I would welcome more of these conversations to learn from different markets that have learned and have evolved more in some places and less in others. And I think there's a ton of value in this. So I'm glad we had the chance to connect today.
Awesome.
And to wrap up very quickly, conscious of time. So I would pick up on the 2 points made by both Isaac and Brad around pricing and scale. I would say that at the base of the pyramid, there is still demand for broadband. And if you can get your kind of unit economics right based on scale and pricing, you'll find a surprisingly large market. That's our learning.
That's a great point. Well, gentlemen, again, thank you so much for those of you watching. So we can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Thank you again, Steve, Isaac, and Brad, for this global episode of Beer and Broadband. We really appreciate it, and hope to have additional conversations with you guys in the future.
Likewise. Thank you.